Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time Studios. And another beautiful day here in the last free state in America, Florida, January 14th, 2022. We are starting the new year with a raft of excellent guests who are giving us all kinds of information that maybe you certainly aren't aware of in your normal daily life. Today, we are honored and delighted to be joined in the studio by Jim Thompson, a long-term expert on coal markets, both domestically and globally. Jim, so glad to have you here. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, thanks for that, Christopher. I've got to amend what you said just a bit. I think Tennessee, here where I'm at, is a reasonably free state as well. Thank goodness.
That's good. I'm glad to hear it. We'd like to broaden the definition and
we'll hang
the
together
area. I know for sure we're free here. I get edgy when I get towards Georgia, and I'm not sure what happens after that.
Yeah, I understand. I completely get it.
Glad to hear Tennessee is a bastion of freedom. This is good news. That starts us out on an even more positive footing. So
absolutely.
As I introduced you as a long-term coal market expert, maybe you could elaborate a bit on what that means, what you've done with your career, and kind of what's top of mind coming into this new era of net zero and batteries, and everyone's going to be great. No more poison in the air, all that stuff.
Yeah, Chris, it's interesting. I actually had a decade-long career in the newspaper business back when the newspaper business was a little different than it is now, and then I stumbled into the world of coal a little over 30 years ago, and had a good long run doing a daily market commentary regarding coal markets and issues in the coal industry. And I'm still doing some work in it, but I've retired from my full-time job so I can do the Jerry Jeff Walker thing, sleep late in the morning and don't wear any shoes.
Excellent.
But yeah, as far as what's going on, it's these are really interesting times, and maybe particularly this year, you're beginning to see some of the issues that a lot of people were concerned about in the global energy space. You begin to see them kind of pop their ugly heads up out of the ground, and you've got, you've had massively high power prices in Europe. You've had U.S. Coal plants that have been scrambling for coal, record high thermal coal prices, record high metallurgical coal prices. And, kind of the sneaky secret that nobody says aloud is that coal usage is still growing across the globe.
Right.
And that's especially because of the growing demand in Asia and in some other developing countries. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive and to be looking at coal, and sometimes a little troubling time.
Well, what I found so funny is for those people we run into who are short-sighted in the extreme, speaking as a member of the New York Coal Trade Association, right? What's not to like about coal? It's organic, it's a compact, easy to transport, high caloric value energy source that created the Industrial Revolution and brought us basically to this point in history, which enables us to be having this conversation across this technological bridge. So the acrimony with people who don't understand much about how the coal markets actually work and how different putting coal less facetiously, putting coal into a power plant is today than it was 70 years ago, right? Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit, right? Because I think most of our listeners will have not touched the coal markets for real. They will not have had the joy of going down into a coal mine, as you and I have, and will not have seen all of the major technical innovations that have come along, like scrubbers on top of stacks and all the rest of it. So, what are kind of the biggest changes over the course of your career? Maybe that'd be a good way to start, that you would see from how the coal market, thermal coal market for power operated when you started to how it operates now.
Well, my career, started with, sort of a year or two after Methuselah died.
He was a good guy, and he did big things with wine.
The changes, I would say that, one way to describe it, back a long time ago, I played football. And the one thing you knew when you were playing ball was you knew where the goalposts were, you know, and what has occurred with the coal industry for a variety of reasons is the goalposts have moved and moved and moved over the years. It's been a constant move. Coal in usage and in mining is actually remarkably clean in most conventional ways that you would describe conventional pollutants. Unfortunately, the sort of sword hanging over the head is carbon dioxide, which is interesting because we absolutely need carbon dioxide to live. So, that would be the biggest change. If you're talking about environmentally, when I came into the industry, there was, the massive push to control other, true pollutants.
Right. Sulfur was the big headache, right?
There've been staggering, progress on that. People don't understand as they drive past the coal plant that white flume coming up is steam and
not smoke. Exactly.
Very, very little of anything bad being put into the environment. But carbon dioxide became the issue, and that's controllable. It's manageable, but it's very, very, very costly, and so that has been the biggest change. Beyond that, from a market standpoint, the fact that we were able to figure out, and it's good that we were, how to utilize, horizontal drilling for gas, fracking, if you will.
Right.
And that dramatically changed the cost of natural gas and made it far more competitive with coal than it had been. I think had there not been had fracking not become available, and again, I'm glad that it did, but had it not, you wouldn't see coal being placed into the box, or the attempts to place into the box that you have now.
Right. As a mutual friend of ours from Kentucky always used to say about guys who are selling natural gas plants as peakers alongside coal power plants, he always used to say the salesman would show up, and when they're selling you the power plant, they would say, "We're never going to run out of gas." And the moment you bought it, permissioned it, commissioned it, and set it up to take in natural gas, they show up screaming, "Oh my God, we're running out of natural gas!"
Yes. I guess the sort of the cruel irony of it is sometimes, at least on a seasonal basis, we sometimes can run the risk of situationally running out of natural gas even now.
Yep.
At particular power plants and particular coal plants, as we've seen in some of those scary winters that they gave a name to, the bomb cyclone and the polar vortex, etc.
Texas, the irony of Texas running out of electricity and heat. Wow. I have many words for it, but none that are suitable for a family broadcast.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I grew up in Texas, and I was there visiting relatives very, very shortly, within days after the worst of that circumstance. And there are no words that you can think of or say that I didn't hear when I was down there.
I'm sure. Where are the unicorn farts and rainbows powering our windmills and solar panels now?
I spent a week one evening in Shreveport, Louisiana, just trying desperately to find a place to use the restroom. So it was bad news down there.
Yeah. So that's fascinating. The fleet is still growing. The absolute percentage in the US has decreased slightly below 50% for the first time, probably 100 years. So most people, when they think of coal, they think, of course, of power plants. But the other thing, maybe if you could touch briefly for those who don't really know the difference between the met coal market and its applications and thermal coal. That might be of interest to people who've never kind of thought about how that market is broken up.
Metallurgical coal, is coal to use in as you well know, Chris, to make steel, along with iron ore in a coke oven. And it is, relatively speaking, under less pressure in some ways because of the reality that I think people accept that there is no magic bullet there. There is no fracking. There is no alternative. However, even the production of met coal is damaged, you know, by some of the ESG concerns and social concerns, you know, just because the companies themselves are damaged.
Right.
But it is coal to make steel. Thermal coal, which, you know, metallurgical coal can be used as thermal coal, certainly.
But that'd be
Thermal coal
cost
is just
ineffective
used
because
to
it's usually
produce
much more
electricity.
expensive.
And that, right. Well, the money generally is, you know, obviously the market says you should sell good met coal into a met market.
Oh yeah.
Although I will say 20 years ago, there was some of the best met coal in the United States was under contract to electric utilities because, you know, bad economic conditions and so forth, you know, that.
Oh, sure. And the U.S. steel industry completely collapsed. So, you know, the cost of ship, by the time you ship it off to South Korea to turn it into steel, the marginal cost at that point was, why bother? I'll just shove it into my power plant.
Yeah, but we did see, you know, just in the, you know, the past few months, you know, metallurgical coal prices getting into the stratospheres, you know, $600 range. We saw thermal coal prices over $200.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's a function of, you know, the headlines always are going to focus on the places where coal is going away. This power plant is closing. This country is saying they're going to use less coal. This, you know, this pressure and that pressure. The reality is that production of coal is much more difficult in this environment than it's ever been. The producers are you know, challenged by getting financing, particularly with ESG concerns. They're challenged with the uncertainty, which further, you know, scares off or troubles investors. They're challenged with the perception that coal is going away, though it's growing. Most people don't know that. Difficult to get young people interested in a business that, you know, you see the headlines every day and you say, it's going to be gone.
Yeah, it sounds like the buggy whip industry. Why would I want to do that? But you touched on something really important, right? And that most people don't think about is that, you know, folks who do not work in the capital markets just assume stuff happens, right? There's stuff on the shelves at Walmart, houses get built. If I want to go to Home Depot and build a deck, there's going to be wood there. Right? They give no thought to how that actually happens. Never mind the complex physical supply chains, but someone has to put up the cash to get that tree into a sawmill, into a pressure treater, onto the store shelves at Home Depot. Similarly, for coal, with this, as I have vociferously fought against this utterly misnamed ESG nonsense, and it drives me nuts that Wall Street or industry ever agreed to this nonsense, because I give those kind of leftists a major amount of credit linguistically, because by calling it environmental, social, and governance, the implicit criticism is that business prior to that label has not cared about the environment, has not cared about society, has turned a blind eye to governance, all of which are utterly untrue, right? So I hate the whole ESG thing to begin with, because it's based on a complete lie that Liz Warren loves, and it's nonsense, right? Most companies are full of people that, I don't know, have families, so they don't want to live in a despoiled environment. They have employees they care about, so they don't want their lives to be ruined, and they want them to be well run so they can be listed and make money, right? So pardon my mini rant about ESG, but the negative impacts, as you just alluded to, are that coal companies used to traditionally go to what? Commercial banks for commercial loans to run their operations. And they have now had pressure put on them, not only by interest groups, but also, terrifyingly enough, governments. Like, you got New York State government suing fracking companies and all that nonsense. So maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit as to, if you're trying to run a business, run a coal business, hire people, pay them good wages, where do you go for money now? How much does it cost you?
Yeah, you're in a capital intensive business, and as those traditional sources, and you know, as you said, the sort of the blue chip, banks and so forth, as those have evaporated, primarily because they just don't want to be yelled at. They don't want people showing up at their, at their office with signs and funny looking costumes and that
Nothing
kind of
ruins a tea time than people
Little-
screaming at you from the clubhouse.
Yeah. No, nobody really wants to have to deal with that. And so, as a result, many of them and most of them, I suppose, have caved, which is a shame. But coal is then going to, more non-traditional sources and good sources of capital with, whether hedge funds or individual investors, people who have, an interest and are still trying to make money and still trying to do something valuable that, is also profitable. One of the problems with that, though, is that sometimes their interests, which are legitimate, but they are not perfectly aligned with something such as mining coal, where you have to have a 10, 20-year outlook on how you're going to continue to produce.
Right.
You have to invest in that next mine. You have to invest in that next fleet of equipment and so forth. And, in many cases, some of the capital, they're looking for sort of a piggy bank, and they're looking for something that they know that they can spin out of when they're prepared to do that. Yeah. And so what that has tended to do is make it more difficult for producers to focus on the future. And I think you're seeing the impact of that today, because this has been going on for several years. So even though you had those record high prices of coal, there was very little impact on production. We used to always say, in the coal industry, that there was no market that there was no good market that we couldn't produce ourselves out of,
right,
and into a bad market.
Yeah.
But that's really not true at this point. It is difficult to bring on production, and just the fact that prices are high doesn't make it any easier in a lot of ways.
Which is one more governmental distortion. In this case, I'm including government sort of NGO pressure groups, World Economic Forum types, who scream and yell again about the misnamed ESG and causing pressure. Right. So I know that from the hedge fund side, there are a bunch of commodity funds that I know, and they do loan into coal markets. And as they've said to me blatantly, so there's no surprise, they understand the environment too, right? And he said openly, if a coal mine shows up on my front doorstep looking for capital, I know they're at the end of the line and they're desperate. I can charge them what I want, which of course is very difficult. And so you end up in this suboptimal place. And for most people who've never had to do commodity-based lending, right? You show up at the bank or whoever's going to loan it to you, you show them your reserves, how much of this stuff I got in the ground, and that's what they're lending against. But as you chew it away, oddly enough, your collateral decreases. We've got to go find more to fill up that collateral basket. But if you're spending all your money doing debt service to this hedge fund that's charging you 18% versus 3.5% to your bank, where's the space left in there for you to both employ people, make a profit of what you're selling, no matter how high costs are, and go searching for more reserves and define them so your lender is happy with the collateral? You must be like caught in a horrible gerbil wheel. A lot of coal executives kind of throwing in the towel and saying someone else's problem, let them deal with it overseas.
Coal executives and coal people in general, coal miners and the whole chain, and every person that breathes air and uses electricity should be grateful for coal miners and the work that they've done, to put us into this modern lifestyle. They have as much to do with it as anybody.
Yep.
But coal people tend to be very, very resilient, very, very stubborn, very, very proud. And so I don't think you see them throwing in the shovels. In some cases, you may see the shovel taken away from them.
Right.
I don't think you see them throwing in the shovels, but it's beyond a full-time job for them to be able to navigate in this environment. And, the other thing, Christopher, is you reach a point where, you know, need for coal, demand for coal is not zero.
Right.
We all can agree to that, I think. And what that number is at the top end, there might be a lot of disagreement about, but you need coal. And when you make it difficult as a society to produce something fundamental that you need, that you require, you're setting yourself up for problems.
Yep.
And as I say, those problems are showing themselves in a very real way, you know, in what is this now, 2022? I think I was born in 1800.
It's okay. The president doesn't know what year it is, so don't feel bad if you don't. It's okay.
No. He and I often just, you know, sort of wander off together and talk about the old days back when Lincoln was in office.
That's when they still had Brontosaurus on the front lawn chewing up the White House grass, right? Those are good
That's
days.
exactly right. We're wearing our loincloths. But you know, this is a real problem, and the extent of this problem may show up even more as this winter goes along. You know, we've here in the US, we've had a relatively mild start to winter. But I can tell you, and there's no question about it, if we hit a period in February, or we hit a period in early March where there is some unusual demand for power, or where some power plants are tripping off because of freezing temperatures, that kind of thing, a lot of people will be really uncomfortable, and inflation is going to look even worse.
Oh, don't even get me started. See, there I was feeling all warm and fuzzy about it, collapsing coal markets and ESG pirates, and then you had to bring up monetary policy.
Well, now we get off this thing, we'll sing a little kumbaya and strum our guitars. And
it's all going to be fine. It's going to be fine. He's got a plan. He's got a plan. It's going to be great.
But
he can't remember what the plan is, but he's been told that it's good.
That's exactly right.
He'll get back to us tomorrow
after
his nap.
You know, we've put ourselves into this position. We didn't need to, we didn't have to, but we've done it, and here we are. And if there aren't major problems this winter, which again, there've already been serious problems, but if there aren't critical problems this winter, there will be some winter. That's
what have been a couple of the biggest problems, like to ground that in an example that one of the listeners.
I think you look at energy prices, you know, particularly in the Western world. You look in Europe, and where, you know, coal has become a small part of the mix, and you look at those kind of record power prices. You look at circumstances where I know friends of mine who buy coal have had a lot of problem, you know, getting enough and getting enough delivered to them. And, you know, just I think the overall energy picture is impacted in ways because, as you know, this is no longer a coal issue. This is really a fossil fuels issue now.
Right.
Now, coal was the harbinger, and maybe you could say that coal has been the most impacted, but it's come for everybody. And you see now the oil and gas companies that are having some of the same issues that hit coal. And I think people fail to realize that energy prices affect every single thing that we do, every single thing that we buy. You know, that you know, that meat that you go to the supermarket to buy had to be delivered. And
so not only are you paying more at the pump to get your car to the supermarket, but the shipper had to spend more to get the meat to the supermarket. So you're paying for it twice at least.
Everybody had in through the whole chain.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's in my view, it's had an impact on, you know, the problems that people are quite familiar with. Inflation. Sure. You know, you go to the store, you know, you want to buy canned ham, you cut off your leg, you know, and hand it to them.
At the risk of alienating all of the intelligent part of my listener base, I'm going to paraphrase what you said and say that ironically, coal has become the canary in the coal mine.
Yes, that's exactly.
And I'm going to take a lot of deserved abuse for that, and that's okay. I felt I had to go there.
Yeah, well, I commend you. I commend you. And, I will just say that the problems we have not seen yet are brownouts,
Right. So
blackouts.
not just cost rising, but just no power.
Yeah,
Can't turn it on, got nothing.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's where the threat is.
Yeah.
The other things I've described are here, and we're all living them, and we're all cussing them, and we're all, many people are getting on social media and arguing about them. But one of these days, you go to that switch and you flip it, and the lights don't come on.
Right.
That's
no matter how much you do this, it's not like priming a water pump. It's not, that's not how electrons work, folks.
People, will, say, well, that's a 3-month issue or a short issue. The problem is it doesn't typically happen in the spring. It doesn't typically happen in the fall.
Right.
It happens when it's 20 degrees outside and you're trying to take care of grandma.
Yeah.
Or when it's 108 degrees in Texas, so it worries me. And, I don't mean to make too much light of it, because I do think that without question that it's a very real and present danger to us.
And so that's a real thing. What we always try to do a bit on Messy Times, for all the fun we have and the terrible puns that we commit, is that the media is full of people screaming at you to give you a quick adrenaline hit of outrage, right? Whether left or right, doesn't matter, right? You get told why the other guy is so awful. You're like, you're right, I'm awesome. And then you forget about it, right? You got your little adrenaline surge. But there's something practical, right? That anyone listening who is worried about this, until there's a bridge to this magical future, whether it's nuclear power or whatever it is, coal is here. Coal's growing in use because we have to keep the lights on, because you all are turning into your favorite social media platform to get outraged, right? And coal is powering that at least 47% of the time. It's powering 47% of the trip you're taking your Tesla. And until that's fixed, it would behoove you to reach out to your legislator and say, this ESG nonsense that you're screaming about is hurting me in the wallet. So until you come up with a practical solution, which I know is insane to ask of politicians, but a boy could dream, why don't you ease off on this nonsense and let coal do its thing until we find a solution? Am I just a naive dreamer suggesting that maybe people should do that?
Well, I think we're probably, I guess as John Lennon said in the most naive song ever written, you're not the only one. But yeah, I think the fact that people will listen, unfortunately, I think it comes down to the poo-poo has to hit the fan,
right?
And when it does, I think then there's more pressure. When you're
coal executives, are they going to be blamed for not producing enough? They're going to be hauled into Congress and demand to know why coal prices are so high, because they must be gouging.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And again, this extends beyond coal now. It extends to the natural gas business. It extends to the oil business. It extends throughout the energy business. So, it's a shame we've gotten to this place, and we've been profligate, with the things that people, our ancestors have given us through their hard work and through their innovation. And we've, kind of decided we're going to cast that aside. It's pretty hard to think clearly and seriously when you're focused on, TV shows like The Bachelor and that kind of thing. And
whoa, that's a step too far.
I would argue that in some ways we're not a particularly serious society.
Oh no, that's our joy and delight. Come on now. But I think maybe every TV show should have a banner across it saying, brought to you 47% by coal.
We'll have to edit here. But it's a position that we've gotten ourselves into. Now, people notice when their power bills go up $100 a month and that kind of thing. And, if it's prolonged, it'll be a problem. But, again, when you go to the light switch and the lights don't come on, that's when people begin to get outraged, or they're on the road and the traffic
sadly they're
lights aren't
going to get
working.
out. Sadly, what we try to guide people to, and part of what we set this whole show up was to tell you who's lying to you and why, right? And most of the time, the people lying to you are in the public sector, because the private sector business isn't usually afforded the luxury of lying to you for too long. If they deliver a crappy product, you stop buying it. Like, there's an immediate feedback loop. Politicians seem utterly immune to that feedback loop. So you're right. People are going to get angry. When their bill goes up, they're going to blame the evil power company, and they're going to blame the evil oil producers. And they're going to be aided and abetted in that insanity by chuckleheads like Liz Warren, who are going to tell them that you're right. The evil fossil fuels companies are doing this to you. They're price gouging, much like the evil sub 1% margin supermarket. Prices are rising there, not because of idiotic policies by this administration, but because they're evil price gougers, right? So, we exhort people to pay close attention. Don't believe me, just listen. Who is more likely to get away with lying to you repeatedly? Because they never have to be judged in their performance. And maybe that would be a helpful message for us to deliver, right? The coal, oil, and natural gas companies are trying their best to deliver you massive amounts of the product they produce. They'd rather you deliver you 1,000 units of it at $10 a unit than 40 units of it at $1 million a unit, right? So they're trying to do everything they can, and they're being held back by regulatory pressure, by government jawboning, by third-party NGOs who claim to speak for the environment. Have I covered everyone else that's impacted, what you saw in the development of these markets as they've
I
gone
think
on?
you've done a good job. I'll just say this: it's always been interesting to me, this idea of if particular industries have so much power that they can choose at times that they want to price gouge, as people call it. It's kind of odd to me that they don't just go ahead and do it all the time.
Right, crazy thinking, right? If I could make someone buy this glass for $1,000 a pop, I would do that, I don't know, every 8 seconds every day. I would not sleep. I just keep doing that. Right.
Yeah. No, the truth is, and after, being in and around these industries for a long time, I tell you something, coal producers like to produce coal, and natural gas producers like to produce oil, and oil producers like to produce oil. And for that reason, they'll produce as much as they're able to produce given the circumstances they're under. Right. And as they produce more, prices will reflect that, because prices will be lower. So this isn't a question of people not wanting to produce. This is a question of people operating in conditions that don't allow them to produce all that we need. Right. And I tell people, Christopher, anymore in the coal industry, when I do some consulting, and I tell people that the coal industry, I think, has almost migrated away from being a supply-demand environment. It's essentially, in my mind, now a demand environment. Supply is more or less stagnant. Supply is more or less not going to change, at least not in any dramatic way. So when there is no demand, there's a lot of downward pressure on prices. There's a lot of pressure on the producers. When there is demand, prices are going to be very, very high, and there'll be a lot of pressure on the buyers and the consumers, and it'll be difficult to get enough of the product. And again, the problem that maybe everybody should focus on is those times tend to be inconvenient, because they tend to occur when the weather is extreme, or when some extreme event has happened, so, I think that's where we are with the coal market. I fear that's where we're going with natural gas, with oil, sort of throughout the fossil fuels industry. And I don't think that people are going to enjoy the fruits of that at all.
Well, thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate you coming on, because it's a very bizarre paradox that I'd love everyone to think about for a bit, right? you or your neighbor or whomever, or some strong group of loud voices in our society, depend upon fossil fuels to run this economy. They're not proposing any changes to their own habits, right? But they want the inputs into that system that provides power to stop on the holy altar of CO2, which we all need anyway, and hasn't demonstrably shown to do anything on a statistical basis. But they're going to get angry when the prices rise, because we have stopped teaching supply and demand economics in schools, because, you know, information and knowledge is a terrible thing if you're a politician that wants to control the sheeple. So that's not an incredibly optimistic outlook, but at least it's, I think, true. You know, coal's here, oil and gas are incredibly valuable, useful things. And I'll kind of sign off with this with you, Jim. I think one of the things we could talk about another time is the kind of certified environmentalist, strong sort of environmental leftist warriors, self-described. A couple of them in recent years have come to a startling realization that if you want industrial society without carbon dioxide, then you need nuclear power plants. For that, they have been thrown out as anathema to the environmental church, because how dare you talk about nuclear? Well, there are trade-offs to everything in this world. Would you rather have a small, highly contaminated, controllable bit of waste and no carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, or would you like to have what we have now? The fact is that most people who oppose fossil fuels can't even conceptually have that honest discussion, is not a positive harbinger for how our society develops. But that's my third soapbox of the day. But I thank you for coming on. Is there any sort of last words of wisdom you would give to anyone that would help someone who realizes that this is a real problem address this in their home state or with their legislature, or you just tell them to, you know, buy more woolly comforters for the coming winter?
I'd probably say that people should pay attention to their power bills and question why prices are where they are. And when they get answers, they should probably be active in talking to their representatives, you know, their political representatives, et cetera. And, you know, then I would say, you know, people are just going to have to accept the name of your podcast is extremely apt. It's messy times and they're ahead. And if you live in New England, if you live in Upper Michigan, if you live in some of those areas, buy a good generator.
Buy a good generator, but you may have nothing to put into it. So buy a good generator that you can shove Crisco into. Well, fair enough.
Well, thank you for having me, Christopher. I really appreciate it, and look forward to further conversation.
Jim, thanks a lot. And for everyone else, you know, thanks so much for tuning in. Send us any questions or comments. We'll pass them on to Jim. And until next time, turn off the news. They're lying to you, and tune into Messy Times, where a far briefer, more succinct and accurate representation of reality. Bye, everyone.